Hello, welcome to this week's Rugby League backchat from the LD Nutrition Stadium in Featherstone. On the panel this week we have Featherstone's very own chairman, Mark Campbell, the RFL's interim chief on-field officer, Dave Rotheram, and League Express editor, Martyn Sadler. Gents, welcome. Thank you for joining us as ever. We're going to start by looking on the field because we've had another big week for a lot of teams in all the competitions, namely Martyn, the Leeds Rhinos, who have they now secured their place in Super League with that win over the Catalan Dragons?
Well, they're not mathematically certain, but I think they're as certain as we can be. Last two games, 40 points in each game. The 44-0 at Huddersfield, 48-8 against the Catalans. And it's not just that they got big scores, but they looked impressive in both games. You've got to say that Leeds recruitment, since they were in trouble earlier in the season, they've gone out and recruited a bunch of players to get them out of trouble. And I was a bit sceptical at the time when they were doing this. I wasn't sure it would work, but it has done. And all credit to Kevin Sinfield and in particular to Richard Agar, who I think has been outstanding in terms of what he's done since David Ferner left the club earlier this season. And it's interesting, isn't it? There's a lot of speculation about now who'll be the new St Helens coach, but the speculation about who might be the new Leeds coach seems to have dropped off a bit, and quite a lot of people are now saying Richard Agar should keep the job. Of course, he's a Featherstone lad, isn't he,
yeah, certainly
Mark?
is.
So I'm sure you'd be really keen to see him stay there.
Well, we
Headingley.
would. Obviously, we've got a good relationship with Richard.
Yeah.
Being a Featherstone lad, I see Richard quite often, and both professionally and socially. And he's done such a good job at Leeds, not just fetching the players in what he's fetched in, but the way he's galvanised the team spirit. I think the team spirit just shines through at Leeds.
Looks so much better, doesn't
it?
And
they just look like they're enjoying playing together again.
Fetched in a good assistant coach as well, hasn't he? Ryan
yeah,
Carr.
he's... when I spoke to Richard a bit, when Richard were on about fetching somebody in to help him, I had no qualms about Ryan going and helping Richard, because I know Richard really rates what Ryan does at Featherstone. And I thought it'd be it'd be good for Ryan, it'd be good for Leeds, and obviously I saw the benefits for Featherstone as well, in that is seeing the Leeds players for standing training on a day-to-day basis, which can only benefit us.
It's picking the best ones out to come here.
Yeah, hopefully.
Dave, Martyn mentioned the new signings that they've made mid-season. Now they've been great, but some of these young lads are flourishing as well at the Rhinos. Harry Newman in particular was very, very good on Friday night.
Yeah, someone like Harry, he's come through their academy system there. Obviously, over a long decades has produced many players, not only for Leeds but also for the whole of Rugby League. And Harry had a great benefit last year. He was very much part of the England academy team that beat Australia 2-0 in the Test series. So, he takes that type of experience and a good pre-season of Super League, and they've persevered with him and left him in the team, and he's flourished as a result, and he's earned, quite rightly earned a call up to our England night squad.
Absolutely. And Martyn, you mentioned on the coaching front, it's telling, isn't it? At first, Richard Agar said, I don't want the job. When he's asked about it now, he doesn't say, he's very non-committal on it, isn't he?
He'd be mad not to want it, wouldn't he?
Do we expect Richard Agar to be the coach next year?
Well, I don't know. I honestly don't know, because Leeds are a club that do tend to keep things very close to their chest. So we're not sure that, that there are a lot of coaches in Australia who have been linked with Leeds. But I think it's always the case, isn't it, that you look at how the guy's doing who's got the job at the moment, and if he's doing a good job, I think you're crazy
without a doubt.
Crazy to change it, And Richard, I speak to Richard quite a bit, and I've got to say about Richard, of all the coaches I speak to, he's one of the guys who's technically one of the most knowledgeable people in the game, in my opinion. You talk to him about the game on the field, and he spots things that certainly I don't spot, so which is probably not that difficult actually. But but he's very smart, very shrewd, very, very smart cookie in my view. So I think if I were Leeds Rhinos, then I think I'd be keeping him on board. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
What about the rest of the teams? Because while we're saying that Leeds are maybe safe, you would have to say that there are 4 teams that aren't. London, the favourites at the minute, 2 points adrift of Wakefield and Hull Cow Pleach this weekend, which is a huge game, and obviously the Huddersfield Giants. Dave, it's it's very hard to predict still, isn't it?
It is, the Premier League football season kicked off this week, and they always talk about 40 points in the Premier League, and looking at the Super League table at the moment, it's probably 22 that's going to get you safe, and it's tight. And London have got a good run in. I think they'll fancy that, pick up some points. And but we were talking before, Martyn and I, about Leeds. Let's not think that they're in relegation trouble. They can still get in the top 5.
Which is crazy.
And that's the way
mathematically,
mathematically could. If I was a coach in that situation, I think I'd be talking about winning points and moving up the table rather than, sometimes it sounds very negative that you put the message of relegation in players' heads. Try and keep it a bit more positive of, we're going to climb the table rather than just avoid 12th spot.
What do you think?
Well, I think Leeds players were relishing this Thursday's game, and that just shows you how much they've turned the season around from 6-8 weeks ago. In that, I can't wait to watch Thursday's game. I think it'll be an absolute belter.
Yeah. It's an interesting one for Saints, Martyn, because
the last game before Wembley.
How do they? We saw what they did when they played London before the semi. Will they go down that route again? Does Justin Holbrook maybe want them to get another game under the belts and have
I think so. I mean, again, I can't read Justin Holbrook's mind, so I'm just sort of speculating on how I see it. But I think Justin Holbrook will put his strongest side out against Leeds. It's the last game before Wembley, and I think he'll say to them, show me that you deserve to be in that side for Wembley. Because the great thing about Saints and for Holbrook is that he's got a bunch of players just bubbling up outside the 17. Who we can put in, Jack Wellesby's been absolutely outstanding, but not just Wellesby, lots of other players. Young Bentley, I think, has come through really strongly this year.
I've been impressed with Aaron Smith.
Absolutely, Aaron Smith's
had a great season.
Yeah, I mean, James Roby can't go on forever, can he? So, but they've got the guys ready to step in when some of these great players retire, which is a tremendous position to be in.
Let's move away from the relegation battle and onto the top 5, because the Salford Red Devils, Dave, they are rising indeed. They're on a phenomenal run of form, and they almost look like the favourites to make the 5 at the minute, don't they?
Well, they're 5th in the table, aren't they? So they've just got to hold their form, and they're in. And for the resources that Ian Watson's got there, he's probably not got the strongest team or the spending the full salary cap. And Ian has done a really good coaching job, and he's been selected as a Great Britain assistant coach. So I think that shows what a great job he's done with Salford. So, good for them to be climbing that table and where they are, because no one would have given them that at the start of the year.
Mark, if Salford were to make the 5, where would it rank in the achievements of any club in any league
Well,
this year?
if you'd have said that at the start of the season, and then you add in that they've lost Robert Louis to Leeds, it's an unbelievable, and it just underlines how good a job Ian Watson's done, and he must have put some work into that team on the pitch to get
him
playing
Martin Gleeson. He's lost Martin Gleeson now.
And I tell you, one of the most impressive things for me, you look at how Tui Lolohea really, really struggled at Leeds, and he looks like a world beater at Salford.
Well,
what's Watson done with him?
He certainly looks happier, doesn't he? For some strange reason at Leeds, he seemed to be carrying a bit of a burden of expectations, whereas at Salford, and I think it probably got something to do with playing with Jackson Hastings. I mean, that's the real thing at Salford. At the start of the season, Jackson Hastings, left Manly under a cloud, wanted to come to this country, and a lot of clubs wouldn't touch him because they all thought he was a troublemaker, which is actually the opposite. He's been superb for Salford as a working with the community of Salford and doing absolutely everything the club would want of him, and being such a positive guy. And Salford took that chance with him, and it's paid off magnificently.
I think players can get this stigma of being a troublemaker too easily, and it seems to stick with them. And everybody's different, and there's a way of managing people in any business. You've got difficult people and easy people to manage, and it's a way of getting the best out of them.
Well, over the years,
it means giving people responsibility.
Yeah.
Actually, a lot of so-called troublemakers thrive on responsibility. Actually.
Well, I mean, over the years, you've had them at Featherstone. I mean, as an example, Dane Chisholm has had that tag. He's never stayed anywhere a long time.
Do you call somebody a troublemaker if they ask questions? And that's basically what it comes down to a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Dave, what What are we thinking about this top 5 race then? Because, as we said, Salford at the minute. Will they manage to keep hold of that spot, though?
I think, back end of the season, I've been a coach myself, and you need that momentum going into cup finals and playoffs, and Salford seem to have that. Interesting point you make about their players as well. Ian's added a lot of value to those players. The fact that the bigger clubs can afford to pay them bigger salaries, and that's another thing that Ian's done, is develop that group of players. And they've Jackson Hastings obviously going to Wigan, Jake Bibby. A lot of their players are in demand from other clubs, and for a young player going to Salford is a good could be a good thing, that you will get well developed.
Martyn, just to move this on to St Helens, because you mentioned the coaching situation. What is the latest there now? Are we any closer to knowing who it will be?
Well, I don't think we're much. I mean, the two favourites seem to be Adam O'Brien from the Roosters, I think it is, isn't it? And Christian Wolf from Newcastle Knights, isn't it? The Tonga coach. Jason Dimitri's been mentioned as well very strongly, but the suggestion is he might want to stay in Australia.
Well, we've just been on about Ian Watson, and he's not in the frame, and yet Jason Dimitri is. And that's what I can't
he might be in
weigh
the
up,
frame.
mate.
You never quite know.
I was going to bring this up, Dave. Is it a little bit disappointing that the top job, effectively, in the domestic game at club level is going, and all the favourites for the post are Australian and not English?
Do we really know that? And
That's true.
I don't know what Saints' application recruitment situation is. How they're going about it. It could be. We don't know. They would have had lots of applications, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. So I think we're just speculating here that yes, Mike's gone to Australia to go and look, but until we know, who's applied, then we won't know.
We had a readers' poll in League Express about who should be the next St Helens coach, and the guy who came top of it was Sean Wayne.
Right. Can you imagine?
And he's not actually in the betting, on Betfred. So they're
that
assuming.
Would be a strange one.
They're assuming that it
correct me if I
happen.
want. Didn't Richard Marshall finish second as well?
He did pretty well.
So,
yeah.
There are British coaches out there, Matt, that are capable of taking that job.
Lots of good coaches. Look at the job what Stuart Littler's done at Swinton. They play some lovely football, and to get them where they are in the league, notwithstanding the performance last Sunday against us, he's done a fantastic.
His bubble,
I know. He's done a fantastic job, and there's lots of other examples of that.
Martyn, if you were a decision maker at a club and you were appointing a new coach, would you, in an ideal world, go down the British route or the overseas route?
In an ideal world, undoubtedly the British route.
Why is that?
Because Justin Hall, you get some great coaches from Australia, and Justin Holbrook is a perfect example. He's done a terrific job since he's been there. But the problem is with Australians, you always know that they're going to go back. You've got an Australian coach here. You always know that, they are Australian. They want to coach ultimately in Australia. It's natural, really.
It's a chance you take because there's lots of other things to factor in. It's whether the families settle, the kids settle.
Absolutely.
There's lots of other things. They could have family issues back, parents illness, whatever.
That's right.
And these are all things when they're 12,000 miles away, it's a distraction, and it's the families, and it's you've got to take that into account as well.
Yeah, I think there are enough British coaches knocking around to certainly consider for the top jobs in this country. There's no doubt about it. And we see quite a few of them in the Championship, don't we?
Yeah.
The ideal for me is when a coach comes up, through a club, perhaps coaches academy initially, then reserve grade, which we're going to have much more of next year, of course, and then ultimately graduates to the top job. Sean Wayne did that at Wigan. Danny Ward at London Broncos is another great example, isn't he? There are lots of others. So, that would be the way that I would want to see, leading coach evolve.
Dave, just on the rest of the league, Warrington stumbling ever so slightly at the minute. Is it all the stars aligning for them to put on the best performance of the year at Warrington? At Wembley, sorry.
Wembley's a one-off game, isn't it? And we're sat here at Featherstone, who've probably pulled off one of the biggest shocks at Wembley of all time. So anything could happen. It's one game, and I think for Warrington, I think they're a little bit wounded at the moment, and they've got good people in the club there that'll get them right for the day. They've had lots of Wembley experience in recent years, so they've got a good experienced team of staff around the players and the players themselves who've experienced big games. So I'm sure it'll be a classic on a week on Saturday.
No, you wouldn't want to write Wellington off, would you?
No,
Yeah,
no,
In a
not
one-off
at all.
game, that's
Never.
for sure. They're totally class players.
Does anyone think that Blake Austin won't play, by the way?
I think he will play, but I do hope he's fit.
Yeah.
Because there have been examples. Think back to 2005, Keith Senior playing for Leeds with an ankle injury. I mean, probably a worse ankle injury than Blake Austin's, but poor old Keith just, struggled in that game and then was taken off at half time and Leeds lost it. That was one of the very few mistakes, I think, that Tony Smith's ever made as a coach. I've got great regard for Tony. There are other examples at Wembley out there of players who played injured. Gavin Miller for Hull Kingston Rovers.
I was trying to think of
Gavin Miller.
the
Bill
name,
Ashurst
yeah,
for
yeah.
Wakefield.
I'll tell you what, we're going to have to
1979.
wrap that chat up there because
Yeah.
we're going to have a short break. After that, we'll be talking reserve grade referees and much, much more. We'll be right back. You've spoken and we've listened. Rugby League Back Chat is available on podcast form from all your best podcast providers. If you're on a trip down the M62 or a flight to Toronto or Toulouse, download Rugby League Back Chat for the best debate inside Rugby League. Welcome back to this week's Rugby League Back Chat from the LD Nutrition Stadium in Featherstone. Don't forget, you can join the conversation too on Twitter at RL Back Chat. For now, we're going to move the chat on specifically to you, Dave, because it's been a busy week on field, which is your remit, of course, at the RFL. Want to talk first and foremost about reserve grade. Yep. Finally back, we've had the lineup announced for the 15-team competition. How pleased are you that we're finally in this position and we can talk about the return of reserve grade?
Yeah, I think it's great that that we've got to this position now. It's been a long time. We've been talking about it, getting through the governance of it, working with the whole of the sport, really. It's not just the professional clubs that have got stake in this. Also got to involve the community game as well as the Super League, Championship, League One, all needed consulting with. And we're in a position now where we can provide young players with that transition that they need between age group rugby league and senior rugby league. And put aside the word, the fact that it's a league competition. For us and certainly for the clubs, it's about player development and providing those learning experiences that go between academy rugby and first team.
I know it was a long time ago, but I never actually knew the answer to this. Why was reserve grade ever got rid of in the first place? Because everyone's always championed it to come back, haven't they?
So if you go back 20 years, so we had the old A teams and we had the old Alliance leagues, if you remember those, and that's where I started my coaching career at London Broncos. And in 1999, we rebranded it to an under-21s comp, if you remember. With 7 overage players, and then going on, we took away the number of overage players. Then it went to under 20s and under 18s, and we brought in under 19s. So we've chopped and changed a lot with the. In
other words, typical rugby league, chopped and changed.
Yeah, that's in
every year.
Yeah, that's we need to have something that stays. So I think we've found a happy balance now of it's not age restricted. We've got some very sensible rules, in my opinion, where you can have reserve team dual registration. So if you're at a club where you haven't got a reserves, then players can freely move between to play in someone else's reserves. But speaking with chief execs, coaches, players, coaches at all levels, they're overwhelming in their view that that's what should be.
Correct me if I'm wrong. It comes across to me that the big thing here isn't actually the competition itself and who comes at the top of the table. This is more about making sure that players at various levels, whether the senior players or whether the players making the transition from boys rugby to men's rugby, they're getting regular rugby league.
Yeah, they're getting regular rugby league, and I think you and I talked on the phone the other day. We've got cases where, let's take Riley Dean on Thursday night, acquitted himself really well on his debut, that would have been the first time he's played against men. And we see that a lot. That one of the bits of feedback I got from coaches was to play in the Super League, you only have to play well in under-19s at the moment. And that's a massive jump to be able to be doing it regularly and to provide those learning environments where young players have got to play against men. And for the sake of the player development for those players where, let's face it, when you're 18, you've still got a long way to go before you're going to be a regular, either a Super League performer or ultimately for us as the RFL, it's about producing a World Cup winning England team, and we need those different environments where players can learn.
Mark, is this a positive step for the sport?
Definitely a positive step. It's positive that all the clubs actually wanted it, and they've all worked together with Dave and the guys at the RFL to make it happen. But I slightly disagree with what you say, in that I feel as though it needs to be a proper competition, and that there's something to play for and win.
Yeah.
I feel
There will be. Yeah, there'll be a league table and points. Yeah,
it needs to be a real vibrant, strong competition.
I think there'll be some strong sides. I mean, you look at the Saints and Warrington sides, for example, that played last week with lots of reserves in each side, and both those sides are going to be very strong at reserve level. The one thing that strikes me though is it going to just reduce inevitably the dual registration players coming to a club like yours from say Leeds?
No, I see it running alongside that because I think the standard of the championship is rose that much, and it's that high that it'll still be a tough competition, and that the players will want to play for Featherstone rather than playing in a reserve comp.
Well, again, it could be part of, you talk about the pathways and the stepping stones. I guess there's no reason why reserve grade can't be one stepping stone and then the championship the next.
Absolutely right. Yeah. And this isn't set up to prove that reserve grade is better than dual registration. Dual registration has done great things for players in terms of developing them. And look at, I think Featherstone and Leeds relationship's a great example. But and what I found talking to certainly championship head coaches was, I don't really use dual registration because the players I'm being offered aren't good enough to get in my team. So it'd be very difficult for Mark to have a conversation with his head coach to say, look, we've got this 19-year-old kid from Leeds who's coming in. He'll say, well, he's not good enough. And, you've got 2,000 supporters that come here every week. You've got a board to satisfy. You've got your own aspirations.
Without a doubt. And there's too much at stake in the championship. It's that everything's that tight in every competition that you can't afford to blood these players.
Yeah.
But the key thing is though that
the reserves fit perfectly for that.
But the key thing is there have been lots of young players at various clubs who've not been getting enough game time in the last few years, and I can think of quite a lot of names who have got pretty disillusioned really, just because the opportunities have not been there for them, and that's really disappointing when you've got young kids, say 18 and 19, 20, wanting to play and not being able to. And for one reason or another, not going on dual registration or on loan to other clubs. I
think you're absolutely right, and I feel as a lot of people say, oh well, those players will go back to the championship, the community clubs, but I don't see that happening. I think you lose quite at least 50% of those players because they want to stay at a professional club.
That's right.
And I feel as though this gives them. There's players who I know Leeds would have kept last year, but they didn't have a competition for them to play in. So that allows them players to play in a reserve comp and develop further, because some are late developers.
So Dave, you said in League Express it'll be a 15-team comp, 18 fixtures a year, is that right? So that'll work in the sense that you play every team once and then a couple?
Yeah, and I think in discussion certainly with the Super League CEOs, they saw it as putting games on Wednesday and Thursday nights, so the fixtures will be structured. Minimise travel where possible, so you've got some local derbies in amongst that, which would be good for the players, and you might get back as it was that first team head coach might say, I need to give somebody 20 minutes on a Wednesday night ahead of playing on a Sunday, whatever it might be.
I think that's really smart putting it on Wednesday and Thursday night, because that will build up its own audience, won't it? There'll be, if you're staging games here at Featherstone, Mark, on a Wednesday or Thursday, I think you'll get 500 to 1,000 people coming. I think.
What's your plan now? Because obviously you've had a reserve grade this year. You're not in the competition. How are you going to?
We'll run them with Leeds.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So they'll it'll be that dual registration.
Yeah,
and stuff
reserve
where
team
you-
dual
We'll still have a
reg,
reserve.
yeah.
We'll still have a reserve team, but we'll run it alongside
Yeah,
Leeds.
so you think, you could be week one of the reserve grade next year. Mark's saying there, you'll have Leeds' numbers 19 to 30 of their full-timers. You put in some, Mark's number 18 to 25. That's a strong team.
Yeah.
And that produces some high-quality competition. So.
And just to wrap up on the reserve grade, what's your hope? What's the aspiration for the RFL? Long term, what do you want the legacy of the return of reserve grade to be?
For us, it's to develop better equipped players for the demands of Super League, and if we've got better players, we'll have better Super League teams. Creates a better Super League competition, and ultimately that'll drive the standards for England. I think that sums it up in a nutshell, Matt.
Just quickly, I did forget this. Keighley and Whitehaven.
Yep.
So they didn't get in. Just outline why they weren't able to get in this time round.
Yeah, like I said at the start, Matt, this was a whole game consultation, and clearly we've just created 15 new teams. We need player supply from somewhere, and a key stakeholder in this is the community game. And one of the application criteria for teams outside of the Super League and those that don't have academies who've got that ready player supply was, demonstrate where you're getting a new supply of players from. And Whitehaven and Keighley, their proposed player supply was massively reliant on the community game, and it'd been very unfair of us to say go ahead and then you run the risk then of players migrating from community teams, and that collapses community teams, whether that be at NCL level or tier 5 and 6.
Fair enough.
We've got to have a high standard as well.
Yeah.
The competition's got to be a high standard, and I think it's a correct decision.
But presumably it's flexible enough so that the following year, if you've got more clubs wanting to run reserve grade teams, and they can satisfy the criteria, they'll be able to
And that's where
join the competition.
Yeah, it's quite right, Martin, and that's our job within our player development team, is that we assist all professional clubs in finding a sustainable player supply that suits their need. And the immediate thing for both Whitehaven and Keighley is to work with their local college providers where they can link with. I know Keighley have got a member of staff who's going to coach the Keighley College team, for example. So you build that in your locality of young players in a college environment where Dean Muir's going to be a part-time member of staff at Keighley College, and you grow that programme, then you're starting to find a player supply. But that's going to take them a couple of years to get that established.
Moving it on to referees, there's been a lot of furore ever since that Catalans-Warrington game. The James Child scenario, Steve Ganson's come out this week in League Express and spoke at length about this. What's your take on it all, Dave? The RFL have come in for some criticism. James Child's come in for some criticism from people. What's your take?
Yeah, that particular, obviously we didn't like to see what we saw at the back end of that game. And for James, it was made out he was dropped. He wasn't. As Steve said, they've got a panel of 10 full-time referees, which, having me the last couple of months, me being more involved with the match officials, you'd be astounded actually the detail of analysis that has gone into post games. And players and referees, like players, they're up and down in their form and move between levels. So there was happens every week. It was a huge amount of public attention was brought to it.
Mark, I mean, you're watching games week in week
Yeah,
out. What's your take on this?
what's frustrating for me as a spectator is just how teams slowly play the ball down, and they consistently they're left to get on with it. And the referees adjust how far they take the team back because they know they'll be penalised. But why don't they just penalise them in the first 10 minutes? The team will soon realise that they've got to get out of the tackle quick, and they've got to make the 10. And week after week, there's teams being allowed to get away with this, and it just drags the competition down. And players get frustrated, and teams like ourselves who want to play quick will stop from playing quick.
Well, Dave, you're the best person in this panel to respond to that one.
I think the response is, everyone's entitled to their own opinion, and for Super League and Championship, there's a thorough review of games. I'm sure Mark at Featherstone, top end of the table, you get quite a lot of our full-time referees.
We constantly our coach gives feedback to referees after every single game, and they acknowledge that the faults are there. But you get to the next game and you're reiterating the same things what you spoke about the week before. It doesn't seem to get any better. That's what's frustrating. You know, referees can have an off game, but when it's happening every week and it impacts on what we're watching, it's got to be addressed. And I'd like to see it get addressed because it needs addressing, because it makes some of the games terrible to watch.
Martyn, I guess you're looking at this from the middle. What do you make of this? You know, is the game too slow? Are the rucks too slow? What's your opinion?
Sometimes they certainly can be, and Mark's absolutely right that a lot of teams deliberately, obviously, try and slow the play of the ball down so that, you know, the attack is blunted. That's the obvious thing to, you know, that their aim. So there is an onus on referees to try to ensure that the game is played at the right, you know, degree of momentum. And but I don't know. Rugby League is a really difficult game to referee, I think, and you've always got to. If referees blow up every, you know, they could blow up many more times than they do, and you know, you've always got that problem that a referee who blows too many penalties then comes in for a lot of criticism.
But if they do it in the first 10, 15 minutes,
well, I think that would be the ideal.
Precedent.
Yeah, you set a precedent.
Players soon latch onto that.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I mean, we signed an NRL hooker, and we've not got the best out of him because the ruck's too slow.
Yeah,
and we can't get. It's no point. It's been no point us investing all that money in an NRL hooker because we're not getting the best out of him. We're not seeing the best out of him because we can't get a quick play of the ball.
It did seem that I watched that Toronto game in Canada, and that was one of the quickest games I've seen all year.
Yeah.
I guess they're in a similar position where they want the game.
Play it quick.
So I mean, what's the answer to that though, Dave? Because naturally, if two teams want to play quick, it's going to be quick, isn't it? Yeah. It's just from the referee's point of view, is it finding the balance of what's simply too slow? Is that basically what they've got to strive to do?
The referee will referee what's in front of him according to the laws of the game and the policies that are in place at any particular time. So, you know, I do know that Steve Presley and Steve Ganson, you know, Steve looks after a lot of the Steve Presley looks after a lot of the championship level, and he's in regular dialogue with coaches at that level. And you know, our referees do get a lot of feedback, and you know they review games together. And
on that
Mark,
point,
I tell you what, we'll have a quick break and I'll bring you back to it. Hold that thought. We're going to continue this conversation after a very, very short break, so stay right here and we'll be back very soon. Welcome back to the final part of this week's Rugby League Back Chat. Mark, I interrupted you while you were in flow there, so the floor is yours.
Just quickly, finishing off about the referees, I spoke to Steve Ganson some time ago, and he mentioned about how many games these referees can referee because they're developing as well. And having the reserve competition aids their development as well, because it's an extra game and a higher standard that they're refereeing at. And it's another game they can fine tune what they're practicing on a Sunday or on a Saturday. So that's another benefit to reserves.
Yeah, that was one thing which was clearly so it impacts all the games, and that's one thing we had to take into consideration is that we've got to find all these extra refereeing appointments. And so Steve was one of the first people we spoke to about how would this fit, and he told us this is great because for exactly the reason Mark said, they're getting in that professional environment, they're getting to know the players, to know what and professional rugby league is very different to NCL standard and the way it's played. So it's for young referees that's a a great breeding ground.
The thing that strikes me though, Dave, is that it's tempting to think, isn't it, that at one time there was a golden age of referees when all the referees were really great guys who refereed superbly and never had any problems and so on. That's just a fantasy. And throughout that time, one of the main issues has been, referees, this, that, and the other. And certainly my father was a great Wakefield Trinity supporter, and his view was that all referees were biased against Wakefield inevitably.
And I think most fans are like that.
Occasionally there might be one who was just a bit less biased than the others.
But it's true that though. I think we've probably all got stories about that. You go and watch with friends of a certain team, and they think that the referees are against them. That's just natural. Mark, I want to move this on to Featherstone. First of all, thank you very much for hosting us. It's very kind of you. You've had a great season on the quiet. There were people who doubted you at the start of the year. Don't think that's unfair to say. There was a bit of change at the start, but you look like you're going to make the 5. Have you surprised yourselves, or did you always expect you'd be in this position?
No, since I've been involved, I've always wanted a team that competed, and that was going to be the case again this year. The circumstances made it difficult. We changed his coach. The coach left on the eve of the season. We went to Australia and got a new coach who's fitted in really well. He's a workaholic. The players really respect him and love working with him. And it was always going to be difficult starting late. But we knew we'd get a good side together, and that's carried on throughout the season. And if there's any players out there what we thought could add to the team and the squad, we've done as best. Dav Longo and Steve Gill's done a great job in fetching them players in. Do
you think that you can go up?
Yeah, definitely. Look at London last season. Who'd have bet on London going to Toronto and beating them? We should have beat London here, and we'd have been in the top 4 last season. That's how close the margins are. So everybody's got a chance. Everybody's definitely got a chance. And when you look in the top 5, I think it's a bit. I strongly believe the final should be in a neutral venue. I think Toronto got enough advantages with visas issues. We had to go to Toronto without our best player. That can't be right. That needs sorting out. Why
will you be able to sort that if you go again?
We're on with it now, but why they can't just pardon 25 players and they're in and out. They're in and out in 2 days. I find it ridiculous. Some of the things what you can't get a visa for, the things what somebody's done 10 years ago, which it's ridiculous.
I thought that
let's put some.
I seem to recall last year when Toronto were in the qualifiers that they made a guarantee that every player would be able to get in. So has that changed now? Or?
Well, we seem to get these guarantees and then it changes, and you think, well, why has it changed? And that we've had to get. There's one player we had to get something from the French police, then the Australian police, and all this takes time. Why can't just pardon everybody and just let everybody in and out? You're going for 2 days, for God's sake.
It seems ridiculous.
Somebody hasn't murdered somebody. He's done something silly 10, 15 years ago.
Do you think, just looking at the championship this year, obviously there's a lot of controversy when the league structure changed again this year from the Super 8s last year, and you were really prominent in the Super 8s. You at this time of the season, you would have been playing, Super League clubs and so on. But we've got a new system this year. Do you think this system has worked with the top 5 and so on?
I think any system would have worked because we've got strong teams and it's created a vibrant competition. I like the Super 8s. I'm sure there's a few Super League chairman might wish they were back to Super 8s at the moment. So it's.
But I think the championship competition this year and the Super League, to be fair, and League One, have all been such exciting competitions. And I think the top 5 really contributes to that because I was talking to Ian Lenigan at the weekend and he was saying the great thing is that in the top 5, every position that is better than the position immediately below it. So if you're fifth, you want to be fourth.
Yeah.
And if you're fourth, which I think you are at the moment, you want to be third, don't you? Because it gives you a better chance.
Without
ultimately.
a doubt.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important. We're looking at points difference. Points difference. It could make that
Could swing
difference.
it,
I mean,
couldn't
like
it?
last season, we missed out on the top four. We could have been second by one more point.
Yeah.
That's how close the margins are, which makes for a great competition.
What if you were to go up? Would you be ready for it? Would
Yeah,
the
of
club be in a
course,
position to
without a doubt. We've got the facilities which we own.
Yeah.
We've got a healthy turnover, which is comparable with some bottom 5 Super League clubs. That's without the added what Super League would bring to us.
Yeah. And the
So
gates
yeah,
that you
we'd
get,
be, and staff-wise, we would add to the staff, but as a business, we're quite.
And you've got a fantastic tradition here, aren't you? I mean, as a rugby league club, you're a big name. You've won so many things in the past.
Yeah, I mean, Featherstone, what a big name.
And it's a great ground these days as well.
Yeah, it's a fantastic stadium. It saddens me when I drive by Wakefields and I look to it's an embarrassment to sport that there's a club in Super League, been in Super League all them years, and you drive by it and it's an absolute disgrace.
It's not the greatest ground, is it? Let's be honest. Just want to move it on, because it's a bigger topic, but something that I know you've dealt with yourself at this club, and that's crowd trouble this year.
Yeah.
You've been very proactive. There's been banning orders and all sorts. From your experience as a club owner, is this an actual problem that we've got in Rugby League at the minute, a rise in crowd?
I think when you've got groups of people coming to any stadium or any event, you have problems, and it's how we're managing it. I think the Rugby League need to take a lead on it and actually work with clubs and set some standards of what's acceptable, what we can do to prevent things and stop things from happening, and educate his own fans as well, because the things you could shout and do 20 years ago, you can't do anymore.
No.
And it's
Absolutely.
educating those fans in that. We want fans to chant and enjoy the game and create an atmosphere, but there's certain things you can't say.
Well, the thing is, Mark, we've driven racial chanting out of the game a good many years ago now, thank goodness. We've done the same with homophobic chanting as well, But in my view, we need to go further and cut out, foul chanting of any sort, whether it's at the opposition or in particular at referees.
Yeah, but
I hate to see that. I hate to see, really bad language.
I don't want to see us getting tarnished too badly, because I go watch Leeds United and there's stuff what's shouted out by 30,000 people. Constantly is unbelievable, and there's no mention of that in any way.
Yeah, you're right.
No.
Dave, I'll bring you in here. I mean, I agree with you, Mark. I go to football games and it's 10 times worse than football. I don't want to make out that makes it all right.
No.
But from the RFL's point of view, how big a concern is the crowd trouble that we've seen at some games in recent time, namely Catalan Warrington, obviously?
Yeah, obviously that was high profile and that was unavoidable on live TV. And we've got the Enjoy the Game campaign, which the clubs have know all about. And that's every level of the game, right from Super League through to grassroots. And Enjoy the Game encompasses the respect campaign. And for us, we want to see people rowing behind that, promote that. And like Mark says, we can perhaps use peer pressure to stamp it out. And I think we're very good actually at challenging inappropriate behaviours, whether that be on the touchline on a Sunday morning at community games, right through to Super League.
Well, the fans do respond to campaigns like that. I mean, as I say, at one time, going many years back, you might have heard, racial taunts, for example. But now, if anybody did that in a crowd, they'd be picked out by the other fans and reported to the authorities, and that's a great thing. And I think, but I mean, the comparison with football, it is a valid comparison. I mean, I'm not a football fan in any way, shape, or form. I don't watch football. And I don't like it, if I'm really honest about it. But the fact is that we promote ourselves as an alternative to football, don't we? And as a family game. Yeah. And what that means is that you can bring your kids, you can bring your granddad or whoever it might be to a rugby league game, and you won't feel threatened, and you'll enjoy the game, you'll enjoy the banter with the other fans. And that's what we want to see in rugby league. We don't want to see people coming and then being upset by some loudmouth idiots next to them, throwing beer over them or, whatever it might be.
The point I'd make though, Martyn, is it not a society problem rather than a
Of course it is, but the fact is, absolutely right. But the fact is that within a rugby league stadium, it's the rugby league and the clubs themselves that control what happens. And, if people come to games who are not prepared to behave in an appropriate way, then we don't really want them, do we? You've shown.
You've got to nip things in bud.
Yeah.
And when you see groups, and if they get away with it 1 week, the following week, they're going to 10 idiots with them. So you've got to nip it in bud. And stewards have got to be, they've got to come and do the jobs and got to know what the parameters are. And they've got to do the jobs when they're here.
I mean, as a club, you've been fined a few times this year.
Yeah.
You've obviously handed some banning orders out.
Yeah.
Now, there are people that are calling for Catalans and Warrington to be given point deductions for what happened. Is that a step across the bottom?
I would say that's a step too far. What I'd like to see is if people have had an issue, that they take steps to address that issue and put things in place going forward, and that's then monitored. And if they did nothing, well, they should get an heavy fine and ultimately a points deduction.
So that's, we're saying, last case scenario on point deduction. Would you?
Yeah, I think Mark will know because unfortunately his club's had to deal with it this year, and the RFL will leave no stone unturned over this. And I know there's been independent investigators appointed to, the case in Perpignan. So I'm sure that'll come back with some very robust recommendations and so on.
Martyn, just to move it on to a slightly nicer note for the end of it, the Championship, there's obviously been the talk of a TV deal. I think there's been a little bit of negativity around Toronto and their final games not being shown. But we are going to get the playoffs on there. How big is that for the competition? And also, what do we need to see from a broadcast deal for the Championship in the future?
Well, I think the playoffs being on Sky is absolutely tremendous. I'm absolutely delighted by that. I anticipate that those games will be played on Saturdays and Sundays. Presumably the Super League playoff games will be Thursdays and Fridays. I mean, I don't think Sky have made an announcement clarifying that yet, have they? To my knowledge.
Not that I know
The
of.
club's been informed yet.
No.
Yeah, but hopefully that will be the case.
I think we've got this opportunity to show what we've got. And if we can get the scheduling right, because what is it to watch on a Saturday tea time? What is it to watch on everybody could go watch a game on a Sunday and go home and watch another game or watch a game in bar after the game live, it'd be brilliant on a Sunday tea time.
Is the onus on clubs that aren't on TV to make the most of that as well, though?
Without a doubt. I mean, I think there's a lot of the ROI model. I think there's a lot of onus on clubs to grow the game, the away support, encourage fans to travel away. I mean, there's a landlord in Featherstone started running buses to our away games, and now that's prompted the other pubs in the village to run buses. So I feel as though there should be an incentive for away fans to go away, whether it's but you need the whole of the league to buy into it. We want to sell we're selling tickets for York from our shop, which drives footfall through our shop and encourages fans to go. Not a lot of clubs will give tickets to us to sell, which is crazy.
It is, isn't it?
You need everybody to buy into it, and if somebody could buy a away season ticket at a discount, I think that'd be a bonus as well.
Comes back just quickly, Martyn, very quickly to events culture a little bit that we spoke about. Giving fans the opportunity to go to an event and day out.
I think that's absolutely right, and the great thing about television and getting clubs on television is that you get to see how much fun it is to go to their grounds. You've got Featherstone. It's a chance for Featherstone or any other club to show the world how great their setup is and how it. If you're looking for something to do on a Sunday afternoon, then coming here or coming to another ground is the thing to do, and I'm just delighted to see this prospect.
Brilliant. Well, we're going to have to wrap it up there. That is all we've time for this week. A big thanks to Mark, Martyn and Dave for coming on this week. That's all we've got time for, I'm afraid. Don't forget you can join the conversation too on Twitter at RLBatChat. But for now, goodbye.